Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm Carleen Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter. And joining me today is our Eastern Washington reporter, Tim Clouser, who has done a deep dive into some of the really important races for Republicans, at least this year, hoping to gain maybe a seat or two after the election later this year. You may know that Washington state Republicans are in a great disadvantage here. We've got 39 or 30 to 19 is the Democrat majority in the Senate, and they hold a 59 to 39 majority in the House of Representatives. And so we've got some priority districts this year for Republicans. And Tim, you spoke to our state GOP chairman, Jim Walsh, about this and where their focus is, where their efforts are going to be between now and the election in November. Can they gain a seat or two? That remains to be seen. So, Tim, give us an overview of what the state GOP chairman shared that he's looking into.
Yeah, so the state GOP chair, Jim Walsh, he told me that the Republican Party is looking to pick up, just 4 or 5 seats. He said they're far away from reaching a majority in either chamber. That would be a big thing to accomplish this year, as much as they would like to do so. But he said just picking up those 4 or 5 extra seats could make a difference in blocking some of the more controversial legislation that, for instance, that passed this year. We have that millionaires tax, which is essentially an income tax on high income earners, but critics are worried that it could eventually impact all everyday taxpayers. Bills that gave the Attorney General's office expansive new powers. In other ones, those bills passed on pretty slim margins. So he said if they were able to pick up 4 or 5 more seats, it could change the scene of the legislature for them. And he listed some priority districts in particular. He gave me the 48th, the 10th, the 24th, and the 26th. And he said also the 5th and the 30th districts might be in play, and they might add a few more to the list. But those first 4 are the ones that they're most focused on. The 48th district is up north. It includes like Bellingham up to Blaine, that Northwest district that borders the Canadian border. Then you have the 10th legislative district, which is like Whidbey and Camino Islands and part of Mount Vernon. So kind of below the 42nd district. The 24th district is Forks, a lot of rural Washington across the peninsula, that far horn of the state. And then the 26th legislative district is Gig Harbor. So a lot of these districts, a few of them have either one Republican in the House or a Republican senator, but they're largely dominated by Democrats. A few of them are entirely controlled by Democrats. And notably, in quite a few of these districts that WGOP is looking at, you had House Democrats that came out and voted against the state income tax, showing that, they're kind of a toss-up on the issue. And WGOP is looking to use that as a foothold to say, hey, maybe if we find a more centrist or moderate candidate, they might perform well in this district. And I asked the chairman kind of what made a good candidate for them. And he said someone that's able to articulate public policy and knows the issues at hand. He said it doesn't have to be some ultra conservative. It doesn't have to be a centrist or a moderate. He said it could even be someone on the left as long as they understand public policy. They're just looking for good candidates in general. But those are the main districts that he kind of laid out.
Some of those more moderate Democrats, you mentioned Representative Amy Wallen of Kirkland. She was the one who, pitched the alternate bill to the income tax to 6346. Hers never got a public hearing, but, she was one of the Democrats who ultimately voted against the income tax when final passage came up. So that's interesting that you mentioned her district. Maybe it's a purplish district, and that's where they want to put some focus there.
Well, I will make a correction here. The initial version of the story that came out, it mentioned the 48th district in the list of priority districts for WGOP, and that would include Representative Wallen's district. That was an error on my part. It was supposed to be the 48th district, so we quickly corrected that. But like you're saying, Amy Wallen, she voted against it. She offered sort of the other take on the income tax. At the same time, though, up in the 42nd district, you have Representative Rule and Representative Timmons, who both also voted against the income tax. And in several of these other priority districts, you have Representative Shavers and a few others that voted against it. And maybe they're not even looking to replace those House Democrats that voted against the income tax. Maybe that is a tool for them. But also in a few of these districts, say the 42nd district, for example, where Timmons and Rule are both from, they have a Democrat senator as well, Sharon Shoemaker. She's retiring this year. In a few of the other districts, you have Democrat senators that are retiring. So if you have House Democrats that are willing to vote against, say, the income tax, and you have a senator that's a Democrat who voted for it, but they're retiring, if they're able to push a Republican into those Senate seats, it might help their ability to stop it in either chamber. Because I think you're well
Mm.
aware it passed on a very thin margin in the House, and had they had five more centrist Democrats, they might have not have passed at all this year.
Wow, and it's so I mean, even picking up a seat or two for the minority would be critical because as the legislation's introduced, into committees, right? It's up to the chair ultimately to decide whether or not those bills get a hearing at all. But then on many of these committees, it's so lopsided that then if a bill even does get a hearing, you're going to have such a minority of Republicans on that particular committee that the bill, if Democrats love it, it's going to automatically advance, and Democrat or Republicans might be just completely powerless to stop it. But if they picked up a seat or two, if that makes a difference in the committee makeup, that can make all the difference on whether legislation moves or not.
Mhm. The majority party is reaching a super majority, a two-thirds,
Wow.
and right now Walsh says they're effectively just the loyal opposition, and they want to build up to be something different than that. Right now, where the party stands, they can't stop anything unless it's a constitutional amendment that requires a two-thirds vote to pass, which would be a super majority. So if they lose the super majority that to the Democrats, that would be a major issue for WA GOP. Um, yeah.
Jim, I know you reached out to state Democrats as well because they're going to be just as focused now that we're out of session up till election day. Did you get a sense from them as to which races they're focused on, and they just want to maybe get that super majority in both chambers?
Yeah, I reached out to the state Democratic Party for an interview as well. It was a quick turnaround, so they weren't able to do the interview, but they did send me somewhat of a lengthy statement from the chair, uh, and she essentially said she wouldn't spell out the districts, say in specific which ones they're looking at, like I had asked, but she did say that they're looking to expand the map, and continue building off of the successes that they have the last six or so election cycles since they've really solidified power in the House and Senate. But didn't say much outside of that except saying that um, they claim that voters support the income tax, or at least voters that want the rich to quote unquote pay their fair share, is what she said in the statement. But not much else other than that they are expecting court challenges to the income tax, but they're confident that it'll play out in their favor.
Ugh, I can't wait to see what those next, what the challenges look like. I received an email back yesterday from former Attorney General Rob McKenna saying, "What are you hearing about next steps?" And he said, "Can't say yet, but stay tuned." So it's coming. I don't know what form that's going to look like, but it's coming for sure. Well, it's what we're middle of March. Feels like election day is a long way out, but it comes pretty quickly. It'll be
Well,
interesting.
candidate filing starts at the beginning of May. So the November election might be months away, but we have a lot of buildup before then. Candidates are already registering with the PDC, the campaign finance disclosure site, putting in what they're raising, what they're spending. Come the beginning of May, they'll start filing, and then that's when you'll see a lot of these races really go into full swing. Then we get into the beginning of August, we're going to hit the primaries.
Nice.
And if there's more than two candidates running for these positions, it's going to be narrowed down to the top two, usually a Democrat and a Republican, unless they don't have anyone running from one particular party. So it might be two Democrats, two Republicans, depending on the area. But for these races, it's safe to say it's probably going to be a Democrat and a Republican. But then come November, that'll be the final spotlight to see what happens.
Mm. Well, fascinating article, Tim. Thank you for writing it up. And folks that want to check out Tim's article can go to thecentersquare.com/Washington. I got to scroll up and see what the headline of your article was. These things are not secrets while GOP lists priority districts for the 2026 election. It's a fascinating read, so I encourage folks to check that out. Tim, thank you again for joining us for today's episode of Washington in Focus. Along with Jim Clouser, I'm Carleen Johnson.